It started like any other morning, quiet and uneventful, the kind of calm that makes you forget how unpredictable life can be. The sun had barely risen over the rooftops when I stepped outside to grab the paper and check on my Jeep. It wasn't just any Jeep, it was an old black Wrangler, rugged and clean, the kind of vehicle that looked out of place among the HOA sea of shiny SUVs and luxury sedans. I kept it parked in my own driveway, locked up and tucked neatly against the garage door. But around here, that was enough to make people talk. My neighborhood was the type of place where people cared more about appearance than common sense. Lawns were trimmed with ruler precision, paint colors had to be pre-approved, and if you left your trash can out 5 minutes past pickup time, someone was sure to file a complaint. It was suffocating, but I kept my head down and played by the rules. At least until Karen moved in next door and decided she was the self-appointed sheriff of the HOA. Karen was exactly what you'd imagine: a clipboard in one hand, a phone in the other, always watching, always finding something to complain about. She already accused me once of lowering the neighborhood's image because of my truck's off-road tires. Then it was my mailbox color. Then the way I parked too close to the edge of the driveway. She'd even taken photos and sent them in with official violation notices, signing her name proudly. I ignored her most of the time, but when she started pointing at my Jeep during one of her morning patrols, I knew trouble was coming. That Jeep wasn't just a hobby, it was part of my job. I worked with the regional police task force, mostly doing undercover logistics and recovery operations. The Jeep, despite looking like a personal vehicle, was actually registered to the department and used for field surveillance. Of course, that wasn't something I could freely share with nosy neighbors. To them, it was just an older off-road vehicle that didn't fit their perfect suburban picture. Karen, especially, seemed obsessed with it. One morning, I caught her standing near my driveway, snapping photos of it like she was building a case file. I walked out and asked if she needed something. She jumped a little, then said, "You're not allowed to park unregistered or commercial vehicles in this neighborhood. It's against HOA policy." I told her calmly that the Jeep was properly registered and that the HOA had no authority to dictate what I parked in my own driveway. She didn't like that. Her face tightened, her lips pursed, and she muttered something about getting this eyesore removed. I figured she'd file yet another complaint and move on, but Karen didn't move on. She escalated. The next few days were uneventful, at least on the surface. I went to work, kept to myself, and when I got home, the Jeep was always where I left it. But one evening, when I was grilling in the backyard, I noticed Karen across the street talking to 2 other HOA board members. They kept glancing toward my house, whispering, and pointing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. I'd seen that look before. It was the look people get when they think they have power and are about to misuse it. By Friday, a bright yellow notice was taped to my front door. Vehicle violation, unauthorized parking. It said I had 48 hours to remove the Jeep or it would be towed at my expense. The notice was laughable, completely unenforceable, but it still irritated me. I took it down, folded it neatly, and slid it into my pocket. Then I walked over to Karen's house. She opened the door with that smug little grin she always wore. "Oh, hello," she said, feigning surprise. "I suppose you saw the notice." I told her she had no legal right to threaten towing a vehicle from private property. Her eyes narrowed, and she replied, "This is a private community, and you agreed to follow HOA rules when you moved here." I reminded her that my deed clearly stated my driveway was not under HOA jurisdiction. She scoffed, "We'll see about that." For a while, I thought she might back down, but Karen wasn't the backing down type. On Saturday morning, I left early for a work briefing, locking the Jeep's steering and wheel chain just as I always did. When I returned that evening, something felt off. My driveway was empty. The Jeep was gone. For a moment, I thought maybe one of my colleagues had borrowed it for a job, but when I called the department, they hadn't authorized any use that day. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what had happened. I went straight to the HOA office, which conveniently doubled as Karen's garage on weekends. The door was open, and I saw her inside with two other members, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. "Where's my Jeep?" I asked. She didn't even look guilty. "It's been towed," she said flatly. "You were warned." My fists clenched, but I kept my tone even. "You had no right to touch it. That vehicle is not under HOA authority, and you just committed a serious offense." One of the board members tried to chime in, saying, "We followed procedure," but I cut him off. "You broke into a locked vehicle and had it towed without owner consent. That's not procedure. That's theft." Karen crossed her arms, clearly enjoying herself. "Maybe next time you'll follow the rules," she said. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked away, dialing my department contact as I went. Within minutes, my supervisor answered, and when I explained what happened, he was silent for a moment before saying, "They did what?" His tone dropped an octave. "Don't touch anything. We'll handle it." By that evening, two unmarked police vehicles rolled quietly into the neighborhood. Karen and her friends had no idea what kind of storm they'd invited into their neatly trimmed world. I stood on my porch watching the officers approach her house, calm and silent, while Karen smiled at them like she was about to receive an award. That smile faded fast when they started asking about the tow company and how she obtained access to a law enforcement vehicle. From across the street, I could see her composure start to crumble as one officer held up a copy of the department registration. Her lips moved, but the words weren't coming out right. The realization hit her like a punch: she hadn't just broken an HOA rule. She'd tampered with government property. I didn't need to say a thing. I just stood there, arms folded, as the officers continued questioning her. The smug look, the superiority, all of it vanished. For the first time since she'd moved in, she was speechless. I didn't know exactly what would happen next, but one thing was certain: the HOA had crossed a line they could never uncross. And Karen was about to learn that not every vehicle in a driveway is just a car. Some come with handcuffs attached. The next morning began with that uneasy stillness that always comes before something bad happens. I woke up early, made coffee, and glanced outside, half expecting to see my Jeep back in the driveway where it belonged. But the space was still empty, a clean patch of concrete where it had been parked for months. The anger that had simmered the night before started to boil. I couldn't believe the sheer arrogance it took for a homeowners association to cut my lock, break into my vehicle, and tow it away like they owned the world. Worse yet, they'd done it to a law enforcement vehicle, though of course, they had no idea. The Jeep might have looked like a personal car to them, but it was department issued, modified with internal tracking, comm systems, and special equipment locked in a hidden compartment. The thought of those self-righteous HOA members tampering with that made my jaw tighten. They thought they'd won some petty neighborhood argument, but they had just stepped into a federal mess. I spent the morning on the phone with my task force supervisor and the county sheriff's office, coordinating quietly. They'd already started tracking the Jeep's signal, and within an hour, we confirmed its location: a private impound lot just a few miles away, one contracted by the HOA for violations. It wasn't even an official tow yard, more like a fenced storage area owned by one of the HOA board member's cousins. The sheriff arranged for a couple of detectives and uniformed officers to meet me there. I drove over alone, keeping my expression neutral even though my mind was running a mile a minute. When I arrived, the place looked as sketchy as I expected: a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, a flimsy padlocked gate, and a sun-faded sign that read "Authorized Tow Storage." My Jeep sat just inside, mud-splattered but intact. A couple of guys were standing around smoking near the office trailer. One of them squinted at me. "You the owner of the Jeep?" he asked. "That depends," I said evenly. "Who authorized you to take it?" He laughed like I was joking. "The HOA. Said it was violating community standards or something. They're paying for the impound." I didn't even bother arguing. "Open the gate," I said. He frowned. "Not until I see paperwork." Right then, two unmarked police vehicles pulled up behind me, lights flashing. The man's face changed instantly as the detectives stepped out, badges visible. One of them approached and flashed credentials. "We're with the county task force," he said sharply. "That vehicle belongs to us. We're reclaiming it now." The guy started stammering, saying he was just following orders from the HOA. The detective cut him off. "You towed a government vehicle, cut its security lock, and accessed restricted property. That's tampering with law enforcement equipment. Do you know how serious that is?" His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. Another officer broke the padlock on the gate while I walked toward the Jeep. The sight of the broken lock chain on the steering wheel made my blood boil. The interior had been rummaged through, glove box open, console flipped. They had no clue what they were messing with. I took a deep breath and climbed inside, checking that nothing critical was missing. Thankfully, the hidden compartment with the surveillance gear was untouched. These people didn't even know what they were looking at. One of the detectives asked if I wanted to press charges against the tow company. I told him to hold off for now. I wanted to see exactly how far the HOA's involvement went. He nodded, understanding immediately. "We'll handle this carefully," he said. "You just make sure you've got documentation ready. They're about to step in it deep." By noon, I was back home, the Jeep parked in its rightful place, but the neighborhood was buzzing. Word travels fast in an HOA community, especially when police cruisers are seen at the impound lot retrieving a vehicle. Karen must be been watching, because within an hour she was marching up my driveway again, clutching her ever-present clipboard like it was a weapon. "You had no right to bring police into this," she snapped. "You're making the HOA look bad." I stared at her for a long moment, wondering how someone could be that self-absorbed. "Karen," I said slowly, "you and your board cut a government lock and towed a law enforcement vehicle. You didn't make the HOA look bad. I'm just letting the truth show." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "That Jeep isn't registered to any government agency. We checked." I almost laughed. "You think the registration on an undercover task force vehicle would say police department on it?" Her face drained of color. "You're lying," she said weakly, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. "You'll find out soon enough," I told her. "The detectives you saw this morning are filing their reports. You might want to call your lawyer." For the first time since she moved in, Karen didn't have a comeback. She turned on her heel and stormed back to her house, muttering something under her breath. I leaned against my truck, watching her go, feeling the tension in my chest ease a little. But I knew this wasn't over. People like her didn't learn lessons easily. They doubled down until reality crushed them. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset, when two police SUVs pulled up quietly in front of Karen's house. The officers walked straight to her door. I couldn't hear the full conversation, but I saw her expression shift from confusion to shock as they explained what she'd done. They showed her paperwork, and she started shaking her head, waving her arms, denying everything. Her husband came to the door, trying to calm her down, but it was too late. The officers weren't arresting her yet, but they made it clear that the matter was under investigation and that tampering with government property was a federal offense. The next day, the entire HOA board held an emergency meeting. They gathered under the gazebo near the clubhouse, whispering and arguing, but the tension was written all over their faces. I stayed on my porch, close enough to hear snippets of their panic. Words like lawsuit, liability, and criminal charges floated through the air. For the first time, their arrogance had cracked. They were scrambling. Later that night, I got a call from my supervisor. "The report's filed," he said. "We're pressing charges on the impound company and recommending investigation into the HOA board for unauthorized seizure and property damage. You did the right thing keeping calm." I thanked him, though I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. The people who thought they could control everyone around them with fines and threats were finally facing something bigger than themselves: the law. By the end of the week, the HOA sent out a community-wide notice apologizing for miscommunication regarding vehicle policy. They didn't name me directly, but everyone knew who they were referring to. Karen stopped her morning patrols and didn't speak to me again. Her clipboard disappeared, and her front curtains stayed closed. I went about my days as usual, parking the Jeep right where it belonged, the lock replaced and reinforced. The neighborhood eventually quieted down, but the memory lingered. Every time I saw that Jeep glinting in the sunlight, I remembered the look on Karen's face when she realized what she had done. She thought she could bend the rules, that her little authority meant something. But that day, she learned that not every lock can be cut, and not every vehicle is just a piece of metal in a driveway. Some things are better left alone, especially when they belong to the law. The morning of the HOA meeting was strangely quiet, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. For days, people had been whispering about the incident with the Jeep, though no one dared to ask me directly. The police had come and gone, the impound company was under investigation, and Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, hadn't been seen in public since the night officers visited her house. I figured she was either hiding or pretending none of it had happened, but I knew the truth was about to catch up to her. That afternoon, I received a notice slipped under my door. It was an invitation, or maybe a summons, to appear before the HOA board to discuss the recent property incident. I couldn't help but smile. They still didn't get it? They thought this was just a neighborhood dispute, something they could solve with rules and technicalities. They didn't understand that once they touched that Jeep, it stopped being an HOA matter and became a criminal one. By the time I walked into the clubhouse that evening, every board member was already seated. Karen sat at the head of the table, her hair perfectly styled, her expression cold but nervous. The other members looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. A few residents had shown up too, curious to see the showdown. I took a seat at the end of the table without saying a word. Karen cleared her throat and began reading from a piece of paper in that fake authoritative tone she used when she wanted to sound in control. "We're here to address recent misconduct and the disturbance caused by your actions involving law enforcement," she said. Her voice wavered just slightly. "It has come to our attention that your vehicle," I cut her off. "You mean the police vehicle your board illegally entered and towed?" The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioner hum. Karen blinked, trying to regain her composure. "We didn't know it was a police vehicle," she said, her voice tight. "And you never informed the HOA about it?" I leaned forward. "I didn't have to. It was parked in my driveway, legally, on private property. You broke into it, damaged a government lock, and had it towed. That's not a misunderstanding, Karen. That's a crime." One of the other board members shifted uncomfortably. "We were just following policy," he muttered. "We thought it was unregistered." I shook my head slowly. "Then maybe next time you should check before cutting a lock off something that doesn't belong to you." I could see Karen's confidence draining away with every word. She kept glancing at the others for support, but no one spoke up. "You brought police officers into our community," she said finally, trying to sound defiant. "You embarrassed the HOA." I almost laughed. "No, Karen. You embarrassed yourself. I didn't call them, the department did. The Jeep is part of an active task force. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you're in for interfering with that?" Her face paled. "You're lying," she said weakly, but her voice had lost all conviction. I didn't have to convince her, the truth had already done that. Right then, a knock echoed through the clubhouse doors. Everyone turned as two uniformed officers stepped inside, their presence immediately silencing the room. One of them looked at me and nodded slightly before addressing the group. "Good evening," he said. "We're here to follow up on the ongoing investigation into the unauthorized towing and tampering of a law enforcement vehicle." The collective gasp from the audience was audible. Karen's hands started to tremble, and she tried to keep her expression neutral, but it was too late. The officer pulled out a file and continued, "We have statements from the towing company confirming the order came directly from the HOA board. Since the vehicle in question was registered to a police task force, this matter has been escalated to the district attorney's office." The silence that followed was almost satisfying. The smugness that had once filled that room had evaporated completely. Karen opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Her face was drained of color, her hand gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. One of the officers turned to me. "Mr. Harris, we've confirmed that your vehicle sustained some damage during the unauthorized tow. You'll be reimbursed as part of the investigation." I nodded, keeping my tone even. "Appreciate it, officer." When the officers left, the room stayed frozen. Finally, Karen tried to regain some of her dignity. "You didn't have to go this far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could just talk to us." I met her eyes. "I tried. You didn't listen. You thought your little HOA rules were above everything else. You wanted control, and you got consequences instead." For once, she didn't have a snarky comeback. She just sat there, eyes darting toward the door like she was hoping to escape. The rest of the board stayed silent, realizing that the woman they followed so confidently had led them straight into disaster. When I walked out of that meeting, the residents standing outside gave me a few nods. They all heard the rumors about Karen's power trips, and now they seen her knocked off her throne. For years, she bullied people over paint colors, lawn lengths, and driveway stains. Now, the same clipboard she used to issue fines was probably going to end up as evidence in a legal case. The next morning, a moving truck was parked in front of her house. She didn't make eye contact as she loaded boxes into her SUV. By noon, she was gone. The HOA tried to recover, but the damage was done. The board members resigned one by one over the next month, replaced by people who actually cared about the community instead of controlling it. They sent out a formal apology letter to every homeowner, citing errors in judgment and miscommunication with residents. They didn't mention the police report, the investigation, or the potential charges, but everyone knew. News like that doesn't fade in a small neighborhood. It lingers, retold at barbecues and block parties, growing into legend. As for me, I kept the Jeep parked right where it had always been, the same black Wrangler with the same sturdy lock on the wheel. Every time I saw it gleam in the sun, I remembered the look on Karen's face when she realized what she'd done the moment her power slipped through her fingers. Sometimes, justice doesn't need revenge. It just needs patience and the truth. Weeks later, I got a call from my supervisor. "It's all wrapped up," he said. "The DA dropped it after restitution. HOA's paying for everything, and the impound company's license got suspended." I thanked him, and he chuckled. "You know," he added, "I've heard some crazy stories about HOAs, but this one's going to be hard to top." I laughed softly. That's what happens when people think their rules outweigh the law. That evening, I took the Jeep out for a drive, the top off, the cool air rolling through as the sun dipped below the horizon. The streets were quiet, the lawns perfectly trimmed, but for the first time in months, the neighborhood actually felt peaceful. No clipboard warriors. No threats. Just silence and the sound of tires on asphalt. I stopped by the lake at the edge of the subdivision, got out, and looked back at the rows of houses. Funny how small they seemed now, how fragile all that fake power looked when faced with something real. As I stood there, the wind brushed through the trees and the water shimmered with the last light of the day. I thought about how close it had all come to spiraling out of control, how easily arrogance could lead people into ruin. Karen and her board had learned the hard way that not everything in life can be dictated by a set of rules written on a clipboard. Some things like justice don't come with fine print. And as I climbed back into the Jeep and started the engine, I couldn't help but smile. The roar of the motor felt like closure, a reminder that sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting the truth do the talking.